In this video, we're going to create a music player that can travel between scenes, can crossfade between tracks, pause and resume, and just a couple other features that will make it a lot nicer than a standard play and stop style music player. You can fade in music, hit play, fade into our game. We can pause, release, so pause, resume, and we can just fade in different kinds of music. And stop. And we're going to set up our system using interfaces, using the game instance, and try to make it nice and easy to work with using proper coding practices. Before we get started, we're going to be using 4 different tracks. Now I have 3. These are some previous songs that I've created in the past. You can find royalty-free stuff. Anything that is looping will be fine. But I'm going to have 3 tracks, and then we're going to use the starter content for a 4th track. Once you find these 3 pieces of music, we're going to import these into Unreal. There's a lot of ways to do this. I'm going to go inside of my game, whatever project you're in, and I have an audio folder. I'm going to make a new subfolder for music. Okay, and I'm just going to import my tracks into this folder. Let's drag and drop. Now, it is important to mention that you need the WAV files, not MP3s. Otherwise, it's going to import a little differently and not work for what we need. Like I said earlier, I'm also using the starter content, right? So you can go down here and we'll see our last track called Starter Music. So I'm going to make sound cues out of these 3 tracks right here. So select all 3, right click and select Create Multiple Cues. This is going to be the modified version that will sound a little nicer when we play. So I'm going to select all 3, Control S. And when we use this in blueprints, we're going to use the cue, not the actual sound waves. For each of these cues, what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up, click the wave player, turn looping on. It's really important to do this for a music system on the music tracks, and then go to your output, select that, and put the volume multiplier to 0.3. Generally, when you export out music, it's going to be very, very loud, but inside of a game, you don't want it to overpower everything. So 0.3 is a good starting point. So save that, and we're going to do this to our 2 other cues as well. Go to your second one, volume 0.3, then select the wave player and put that on looping. Save it. Go to the last one, volume multiplier 0.3, wave player, looping, save. This is going to help us for testing. Now, I mentioned my 4th track down here. If you click on audio and go down to starter, open up the starter music cue. See, it's already at 0.35. Let's just bump that down to 0.3. And then turn that to looping as well, which it already is. Okay, great. Save it. And now we have our asset set up. We just want to start building our system. The next thing we need to do is we need to set up our game instance because we want our music player to work between scene loads. So for example, we may want our music to continue playing from our main menu into our loading screen, into our level select or whatever. We can break up our levels, but have our music continue playing, and then we just change it whenever we need to change it. So we're going to handle this on the game instance, which does travel between scenes, and we're going to put our functionality on that. But in order to do that, we need to create our game instance, unless you already have one. So since I don't have one in this project, let's go down to my blueprints. I'm going to make a new folder, call this game. And inside of here, let's right click. Let's click on Blueprint Class, and let's go down here to All Classes and search for Game Instance. You see a couple pop-ups. I'm going to click the one in the middle, Game Instance, hit Select, and I'm going to give it a name, BP underscore. My game is a first-person game, so I'll say first-person game instance. Control S to save it. So just because we have a custom game instance class created doesn't mean we're using it. So let's set it up. Go to Edit, Project Settings. At the very top, you can just type in Game Instance and it'll sort it out for you. We're looking for the maps and modes up here, and underneath that, the Game Instance class. This is the Game Instance class it's going to create when we run our game. We don't want the default one, we want our custom one. So change it to our BP underscore first person game instance that we made, close it out. Control S to save. So now if we open up our BP first person game instance, we can put custom logic in here and run it from this object that will travel with us between scenes, which is exactly what we want. Now, the next thing is I don't want to cast to the game instance every single time I want to use it, because this is a more specific first person game instance, not our generic one. So we do need an easy way to access it without having to cast. So we're going to use interfaces for that. It's also good practice to kind of think through what are the functions that we need, and we can define those on the interface. So I'm going to come over here, right click and go to Blueprint Interface. Call this BPI underscore music player. select it, Control S to save. And when you open it up, now I want to define all of the different functions I need for my music player to work. I think I'm going to need a play music, add another one, function, stop music. I probably also want to be able to pause and then resume. So let's say pause music. Let's add one more, resume music. Okay. The other nice thing about this is we can also require inputs. And a way to think about this is if I'm going to play music, what would I need to know in order to play my music? So we're going to need to take in a few things. In play music, select this and go down to inputs, hit plus. The first parameter to take in, we'll call this music. So play music and then play the music that we send in. We're going to change the type to sound base. Here, object reference. This way we can take a wave or a cue, but we're going to send in the cues that we created earlier. Let's make two more parameters. Because I mentioned that I want the capability to crossfade, I need a fade out time and a fade in time because I need to fade the current music out and I need to fade the new music in. And I want the designer to be able to decide that at different locations in the game when they use this. So I'm going to make those two things as parameters. So the first thing will be fade out time old, meaning the old music, the one that's currently playing at the time where we want to play new music. Let's change that to float. Let's make one more. Fade in time new. Now I could just call this fade out and fade in, but I just want to make it really clear what's happening for the designer who's using this. We can compile, we can save, and we can leave these defaults. If we put it at 0, then there's no fade time, and I think that's fine. Go to our stop music, and this one, I actually want a fade time. Because when we're stopping, we're just fading out. We're not playing anything new. So let's call this fade out time. Keep it as float, compile, save. And for our pause and our resume, we really don't need to take in anything. Just pause or resume, and that's it. So compile, save. And the last thing we need to do is actually apply the interface that we just made to our first-person game instance. So go back into our instance, go to class settings, and we're going to implement the interface over here. Click add, type in BPI underscore music player, select that. And you'll see that all of the functions that we just created over here are over on the left underneath interfaces. So now if we double click, so play, it'll create an event for us so we can then fill out. I'm just going to click all of these so we have a roadmap of what we're doing. And as long as we can put in the functionality for this, then we can very easily call it anywhere we want. Okay, let's start with our play music. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set all of these three parameters as variables just to clean up everything, make it a little bit easier. So right click, promote to variable on music. We'll set that. Right click, promote to out time. Right click, promote to variable for fade in time. Okay, just connect these in. You know, there might be an easier way to do this. Either way, I want to be able to easily get access to these much further down the graph. Okay, so once I have these, let's fade in our new music. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag in my music over here, get music, and I'm going to create a sound 2D. So create sound 2D. Now what this is going to do, pull that up, pull the drop down. If you hover over, this function allows users to create audio components in advance of playback. Essentially, it's going to create an audio component that will play sound configured for 2D, and then we are going to hold on to that reference from our game instance and then use it later for playing or stopping or destroying. So we're going to create it and then hold on to it. So once we create it, we need to actually plug in this execution node over here, play it at all the defaults. We also want to turn on persist across level transition, and everything else is default. Okay, so once we create the sound 2D, we are going to right click and promote this resulting return value to a variable, and we're going to rename this active music player. Okay, so if we want a reference to the audio component that is currently playing the music, we can just look to this reference over here. The last thing we want to do is you want to fade in the new music being played. Now, the cool thing is if you just drag off of here, we have a function built into audio components that can fade in. So what this is going to do is it's going to play and then it's going to animate the volume all the way up from 0 to 1 based on some kind of duration, which we already received. So get fade in time new, plug that in, and you should be good. Now this is going to play the music, so I'm going to select all of it, comment with C, fade in new, and we should be good here. We have our play music implemented, And before we do stop, let's just do our pause and our resume really quick because it's going to be really simple and our stop's a little bit more complex. So for our pause, all we need to do is get the active music player. So pull that in, get, pull off, and say set paused. Okay, we have this function built into the audio component, which is very convenient. Pull that down and say pause music, active music player, pause is true. So check that. Let's highlight those two nodes, copy paste them down here with Control C, Control V, hook it back up, and then uncheck it for resume, which means unpaused. Honestly, this is all we need right here. Let's compile and save. Now, our approach to our stop music and our crossfade in general is that we're going to hold on to a separate audio component that we'll call the fade out music player. And when we're ready to fade it out, we're going to take the active music player, change the reference into the fade out music player, have that one fade out, and then put the new one in the active music player. So we'll create a new one and make that the active while our second fade out one is fading out. So it sounds a little bit weird, but it's going to look something like this. If we select our active music player and Control D to duplicate it, let's call this fade out music player. So we have our second music player that all we're going to use this for is moving our active music player into it and fading it out. And then we're going to create a new one and reassign our active. So to do this, let's take fade out music player, drag in and say set. We're setting this object reference to our active music player. So we're just pointing our fade out music player to our current active one. So once we set that, we are going to fade out. So from our newly set fade out music player, let's drag off and say fade out. We have this little function. It's going to fade out, and at the very end, it's going to call stop. Once it's done fading out, let's make sure to pull our fade out time into our fade out duration. This is the parameter one, not the one over here, although technically you could pull it in as well. But I'm just going to make this very clear. And I think this is all we need. I'm going to make sure that my auto destroy is checked over here, because what this is going to do, if you hover over, once the sound is either completed or stopped, it's going to take care of itself. You can see this through the comment, which means that after we fade out, it will stop. And then if we have auto destroy on, it will destroy itself. That way, even though we're creating lots of Sound 2D components, we are destroying them when they're no longer used, and we're creating new ones whenever we want a new one. So this should help clean up after ourselves as we fade out and stop. It should then destroy. Let's compile and save. And while we're here, let's go ahead and add our crossfade functionality. So before I fade in my new, let's actually select these set local variables, select those all, hit C, say set local variables. And after we do that, let's just call our stop music either function or BPI music player. I'm going to select BPI music player. And our fade out time is going to be our fade out time old. So stop our music and pass in our fade out time old. It'll pass it right in here and fade it out. And the other thing is, the first time we run a new track, we actually don't want to stop the current track, right? Like we don't really have one playing. We don't have an active one yet since we're creating it over here. Let's just do an is valid check. I'm going to drag in my active music player and say get. And if we haven't assigned it, it's still null. So drag off and say is valid, the little question mark one. So if it's still null and hasn't been assigned yet, let's make a little bit of space here, drag in our execution, is valid, then we do want to do this. If not, meaning that it has not been assigned yet, this is our first time running it, essentially, then let's just skip our stop music and create one because we don't really have one at the moment. So drag off is not valid and just plug it in to create Sound 2D. A double click little reroute node here, pull that down and around. Just a little note that we're skipping this step. If it's not valid, we'll create it over here. But if it is valid, then we want to run our stop music, pass it, and fade it out. Let's compile, save, and I think this is all of our functionality that we need. We just need to test it out. So one quick note here, a little tiny gotcha that I just want to call out. In one of my previous tutorials, when I was making my main menu, I was using a camera fade node, the start camera fade. And one of the options here is should fade audio. Now, if you have this turned on, your camera system is going to fade your audio and it's going to sound like your music is doing something unintended. I'm going to recommend that you turn that off. It was useful for prototyping, but now that we're building a better music system, we don't really need that anymore. We can fade it through our stop fade if we want, but I don't want that to interfere with what we're hearing. So just if you are using this, make sure you turn it off. If you don't know what this node is, then just don't even worry about it. I just wanted to call that out really quick. So what I'm going to do to test my music system is I have two different levels. I'm going to test to make sure that my audio is persistent by having two different maps, and on level begin inside the level blueprints, I'm going to call my play music. So for example, over on my maps over here, I have a main menu. As long as you have two different levels and you can just open level by name or whatever to hop between them, you should be fine. So inside a main menu, on level begin, so we'll do this in the level blueprint, open level blueprint. At the very end of my begin play, I'm going to call my play music function. So the way that this works, I'm going to right click, get game instance, and off of this, I'm going to pull and type play music. And you see this play music message, we can click that, and we don't need to cast because we are sending the message through the interface. If the game instance implements the interface, then it'll do it. If not, then it just won't do anything. So this is a way that we can run methods without having to cast by just passing it through the interface. So it's just really handy. It's a lot less code. It's just kind of nice to be able to do. For the music, let's select any one of your music cues. Remember the cues, not the waves. I'm just going to select my first song right here, compile, save. So this is going to play on begin on my main menu map. Then I'm going to go to my actual level where I'm putting my gameplay. So that's going to be in my first person maps, first person map. Open the level blueprints for this one. And on begin play, let's do the same thing. Get game instance, pull that down, play music message. Okay. So you can see how quick this is once we start setting our system up this way. Plug it in. Let's choose a different song. Let's make sure you choose the cue. Okay. Compile and save. And I think we can test this. We just need to make sure that we have a way to open our maps inside of this first person map if I'm in the game. So inside of my level blueprint, just for testing, I'm going to do a key press to go back to my main menu. Long term, this would be like a pause menu and return to main menu. But for now, I just want to test my system. So inside of this first person map, we'll type keyboard, tab, I think makes sense, tab. So if we press the tab key while inside of this first person map, pull off, and we'll say open level. You can either do by name or by object reference. I'm going to do by object reference. That way I can do the drop down. Type in main menu. This is the level I want. Compile, save. So while I'm in the game, I'm going to press tab to return to the main menu, which remember on begin play, we'll play our main menu song, and on begin play here, we'll play our other song up here. Okay, go back to my main menu. And you just want to make sure that you have a way to go to your other level from here. For me, I believe it's on the UI over here on my button press. So when I press the play button, I am doing some things and I am opening my first person map. So we're not putting the fades in, we're just calling play music. Let's actually test our crossfade. So let's do 3 second out, 3 second in, compile, save, and we'll do the same thing in our first person map. Inside of the level blueprint right here, we'll do 3 second, 3 second. You could do instant if you want. Let's save that and test our 3 second crossfade. So let's open up from my main menu, hit play. Okay, so we hear the music fading in, that's good. Hit play and we should hear our crossfade. Tab. All right, sounds pretty cool. The reason we're getting that crossfade is because the music is persisting, continuing into the next level, and then fading out as our new level music is fading in. So a really cool demonstration of what we can do with our crossfade system. All right, the last thing we're gonna do is test the extents of our system. Let's open up our first person map, whatever the gameplay one is. And I'm gonna go into the level blueprint here, and I'm gonna do 3 different tests. Again, these are all placeholder, right? You'd actually want to pause menu and things, but I'm just going to do key presses just to speed up the tutorial and stay focused. So the first thing I'm going to do is on my 1 key, so keyboard 1, when I press the 1 key, let's do a longer fade. Let's actually try fading out something quickly and fading the second song in very slowly. So we'll do our get game instance, pull off, say play music. Pull that over here, plug it in. And the music, I'm going to choose my 3rd song. Okay, so we're going to do a 1 second fade out of whatever is currently playing and a 5 second fade in for our new song. Let's also do another keyboard press. Let's do keyboard 2. And this one we're going to play music. Let me just copy paste this down here. Plug in pressed. And I'm going to choose my 4th song. So that is the starter music, I think. Starter music. Select the cue. On this one, I'm going to do a long fade out on the old and a quick fade out on the new. This way you can see the difference between how this crossfade would work and show you the kinds of things that you might want to do. Let's actually do another keyboard press. Let's right click 3. And on 3, let's actually try our stop. Let's do a stop without playing any new music. So just stop whatever the current music is. Let's fade it out at, let's just do 3 seconds. We'll test our stop. The last thing I want to test is I want to test my pause and resume. So let's type keyboard P. And when I press it, let's pause. So we'll right click get game instance, drag off and say pause. So pause music. Oh, I realized over here we don't have a target. So let's make sure we Control C, Control V, give it a target. Okay. We actually need to run our interface method on a target, and that target needs to implement it. So just make sure you plug that in. All right. So on pressed, we'll pause. And let's just do this. When we release, we'll unpause. So resume music, and we'll just Control C, Control V the target. All right, so a couple little tests for us. 1 and 2 will be different fade out times. 3 will be stopping, and P, when we press, it will pause, and when we release, it will resume. So let's try it out. Hit play. So I'm gonna press 1. Okay, quick fade. I'm gonna press 2. Three to stop. Okay, I'm gonna press 1 again so that we can start it up again so we can try our pause. And then P. Hold it and then release. Okay, then tab. All right, that is our music system in a nutshell. Let's actually get rid of all our tests, or you can continue to test if you want, but then you would want to clean everything up. So with this system, as you can see, you can do a lot of polished fading with your music. You can call it from anywhere you want, and it is always there, so you can run it between scenes. You can also add even more functionality to your music system. You probably want to add the interface for it and then implement it. But I hope this gives you an idea of how you can start to create a simple, but I think nice sounding music system for your games.